Hi, and welcome to basically week 6. We've just finished up week 5 and we are now in week 6. Week 6 is where you are going to be, of course, finishing up your midterm if you haven't already taken it. Your midterm, of course, is a proctored exam. It's open book, so you can bring in your book. It's open notes, so you can bring in any notes that you have. And, of course, the study guide, too, that's located under the week 6 discussion area. So you have no readings for this week. Instead, you have just the preparations for the midterm, and that will close on the 19th. So please make sure that you finish it on the 19th. And let me just do a real quick check. I believe it closes on the 19th at 11:30 p.m. But let me do, like I said, let me do a real quick check. Um, so it does close at 11:30 p.m. on the 19th. So you do have a little bit of time to make sure that you complete it. Just to let you know, in relation to your work that you will be doing for week 6, of course, it's the exam, and then week 7 will then start back up your normal readings. And so if you want to get a head start on that, please feel free to do that. It's the Harlem Renaissance, Depression literature, and the poetry that emerged. So you're going to be relating to the shift between modernism and postmodernity. Um, so what I have found, just to let you guys know, is that you've done a great job of engaging the literature and really having a conversation about it. And I appreciate the work that you have done. Tammy started it off, of course, with her notion that modernist fiction is full of expression, imagism, symbolism, and is written in free verse. And then she really did a good exploration of Weinsberg, Flowering Judas, The Snows of Kilimanjaro, Babylon Revisited, and then, of course, the modernist poetry. So I really appreciate Tammy's connections. Holly also had some great perspectives on the turmoil of war and depression and how that affected the literature of the moment and the period. I really enjoyed reading your posting on Holly, your posting on the Flowering Judas story, because it really does have this inner conflict that is very much present throughout the text. The interior landscape becomes something that modernist fiction really does galvanize around and towards. Tony, thank you so much for your posting. I appreciate that you mentioned the darkness that you see. There is a sense of alienation and exile and almost a feeling of fruitfulness or futility in these texts, and those are giant tropes of the modernist movement in literature. I also really appreciated Natalia's conversation about modernism being a break in tradition, that it is something that is kind of producing a sharp cut from what came before. And in particular, her reading of Babylon Revisited really does capture that ennui and that feeling of alienation from before, also with this notion of the break. The desolation of the war, the emptiness of the streets, the symbolism that really kind of showcases how modernism feels. Um, I also like that Natalia asked a couple questions of her peers. Remember, that's what makes an effective discussion posting, is that questioning, that inquiry. Christopher, thanks so much for posting your observations that the readings do seem a little bit simpler. However, they do also evolve and focus on the troubles of civilization. Um, I think that your question about the story A Stepping Stone to Revealing How Society Dealt with Possible Pedophilia is a great question to ask. It has been asked a lot about this work, and there has always been a tension around Sherwood Anderson's short story Hands, because it does seem to address a darker concern, or the underbelly. Um, and I think that that is what kind of Carolyn Blocker was mentioning when she kind of pulled in Catherine Ann Porter's notion of things don't seem to be what they appear to be. Much like Catherine Ann Porter's Flowering Judas contains a character whose figure is not the Catholic that she appears to be, I think the same thing goes with Hands, in that he is not what he appears to be. Um, Christina had some great connections with Babylon Revisited, which I thought was key, and I really enjoyed her reading of In Robert Frost, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, because this really does use evidence to support her point of view, and pulling in the notion of the mending wall is another great piece of poetry from Frost. Um, Sharon had a great definition of modernism as in being reflective of a shift in focus to the character's reflection. And I think that's a great point of view, is that these literary movements were shifts and did have um, different perspectives operating in their text. So I appreciate that observation. And her posting was great. I loved all the rich poetry that you explored in your posting. Michael, thank you for providing a good basic understanding of the literature. Remember, I would like to see a little bit more development of your readings. I think you are starting and continuing on a good foundation. Um, I really did also think that, Ralph, your postings back to your peers were phenomenal, and I really appreciate the level of detail and engagement you are expressing with your peers. Darcella, thank you so much for your focus in the fiction about self-identity and awareness. And that is true. The moderns were very comfortable with taking the I stance. They were very much about focusing on the immediacy of the effect or the immediacy of the experience. And you can see that particularly in Hemingway and Fitzgerald. Robert, amazing post. I absolutely love that you, one, gave a good synopsis and analysis, and two, that you really engaged in kind of connecting us to the information and where you received that information. Very sophisticated, and I really think you did a fantastic job. And also your responses to your peers were great too. Chandraka, thank you so much for your reading of the fiction, and I like that you point out the satire and irony and this kind of almost spoofing of the inner self and consciousness. It's an interesting perspective to take. Um, Brittany, I was very glad to see your reading of Sherwood Anderson's Winesburg, Ohio, and specifically the short story Hands. I think you did a good job of engaging with the notion of the private and public mind, and I think that's an important tension in modernist fiction. Franklin, nice history in kind of connecting the shift from the Victorian era to a more popular American modernist perspective. The idea that the personal becomes the public is also present in yours, and you had a great perspective on this. Jamelia, thanks so much for focusing on modernism as a cultural movement with focus on art, architecture, music, design, and then literature too. It's important to realize that these things just didn't function in absentia of culture. Monica, thank you so much for your posting. I think that you did a good job of engaging each of these different aspects of fiction. And I appreciate the kind of the reading of Hands. It seems that many of you enjoyed that short story in a different way, and so I appreciate seeing that. I think overall you've done a great job, and whoops, I just dropped my apple. I do think that you've all done a great job with the literature, and I'm really anxious to read the midterms and see how you're dealing with it at that level. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to contact me. Thanks so much, and have a great day.